Well, hello friends. It's Wednesday, July 10th, 2024 here on the farm. It has been a rainy, wet, to say the least, spring and beginning of summer here in Minnesota. And I've had a number of friends and professional colleagues, groups of people that I work with who are reaching out over the last few weeks and saying, hey, how are you hanging in there with all these wild weather conditions? And I also haven't made a YouTube video in forever. And I thought, let's just kind of address everybody's question. And I'll give you a farm tour. I was going to say quick. I don't know if it's going to be quick, but I think we'll do a field walk, and I'll show you what the conditions look like around here, and talk a little bit about some things that we're emphasizing this year, along with how we're dealing with the wet weather conditions and how our soils and crops are responding to this adverse situation that we're in. But let me show you what I'm working on first. So at the moment, I'm turning a compost pile, and we've gotten really into composting this year. It's something we were doing on a smaller scale, and now I've ramped it up, and I'm hoping to go even bigger with it as time goes on. But this is the latest windrow that I made, and I'm in the middle of turning it, which is a good time to showcase it. So this is a couple of weeks old. It's been turned once already. It's gone through 2 heating cycles. It's just kind of coming down off its second heating cycle. And I'm hoping as I turn it that maybe it'll heat up one more time, but if it doesn't, that's okay. But I wanted to show the fungal activity in here. So this compost, the purpose of it is eventually to make it into compost extract and to put it on with the corn planter or the compost extract injector that I built, which we're doing in the fall and in the spring, putting compost extract in furrow with the corn crop, and putting compost extract on, sort of blanketing the field with an injector before soybeans. And I'm hoping to spray it on the fields as well, but I'm working on getting a sprayer set up separate from our chemical sprayer, which is going to take some time and money, and we're still sussing that out. But you can see all the mushrooms and stuff that were sprouting out of this pile. I feel kind of bad turning it, but some of them have already wilted and released their spores, and that's really kind of the main goal, is to just give them a chance to get their spores out there into the pile. And then once it's turned, there will be another flush of them, hopefully, if the moisture levels are right. So you can see I've been wetting this, spraying it down with the hose and turning it, and look at how nice and rich and dark that is. Next to it, we've got another pile that I built earlier this spring, and that one has been turned twice, and you can see it's way reduced. It's breaking down. You end up with about half the volume of whatever your initial amount is, maybe even a little less. So that's kind of cool. That one's just sitting and aging at this point. And that's one of the things that we're really hitting hard this year is compost. Now, of course, I'm turning it all with a pitchfork, so it's all using the Armstrong compost turning system. If I go any bigger, I'm going to have to look into some kind of a mechanical solution to take the pressure off of me. It's a good workout, but as a guy who's already had tendonitis and a number of elbow issues and stuff, there's only so much of this I can do. But for now, we're holding out with the Armstrong system. In time, I'd like to make a whole video series about composting and compost extract and how we're using that on the farm. And we actually just got into vermicomposting as well. I bought my first 2 pounds, so 2,000 to 2,500 red wiggler worms, and I've been feeding them finished compost along with a few other feedstock type things and trying to get them to multiply. And over the next couple of years, I want to get that up to like 1 million worms, and we'll be producing worm castings and then making worm casting tea or worm casting extract, vermicompost tea, whatever terminology, flavor you prefer. And that is going to provide an even richer input source for us to be able to put in furrow or to spray onto our, as a foliar application on our crops. So we've got a number of compost things in the works, but I'll probably hit that in greater detail in its own series of videos. So for the rest of today, we're just going to talk about crops and conditions right now. There, that's all done. And now that that pile is turned and I'm all sweated up, let's go on a farm tour. All right, we're going to start off with me standing in the middle of the road because I like to live dangerously, but mainly because it straddles 2 of our fields that are in soybeans, so we'll take a look at those first. Just to give you a frame of reference, the farmyard is over there, and we are across the road looking at this, which is a 2 acre, little over 2 acre patch that we rent from a neighbor. This normally is very sandy, gravelly soil, and it doesn't usually produce well. But this year, with all the rain, this sandy, gravelly soil is really holding its own. And the beans here look really good. We got in and sprayed them at a decent time. There's some grassy weeds coming up, but things are looking pretty clean for the most part. You will notice that's a theme with our beans. Our beans look really clean this year, and they're hanging in there really well. The excess moisture has affected them less than the corn crop. And so that's nice. We have a really good, solid looking soybean crop. I'd say, barring some kind of a severe weather event here in July or August, we are looking at one of the best soybean crops we've had on the farm in many years. That's a dangerous thing to say. A lot can happen between now and harvest, but take it for what it's worth. I'm keeping my fingers crossed, and if all goes well, we'll have a really, really nice crop of soybeans. I'm going to flip the camera and we'll look at this other field that's just across the road from the 2-acre field we looked at just now. All right, admittedly, this is a very close-in view here, but I want to point out this hill is all sand. And this normally, no matter what we plant in here, if it's a normal year or a dry year, this produces nothing. And it's got decent beans growing on top of it. This would be a candidate for me to put down compost in this area just to get the organic matter level up. And you can see they're a little thin even with all the rain we've had. It just does not hold any water, and there's no nutrient here. But here's the rest of the field. If I crest the hill, you can see it's looking really good. This field typically does fairly well in beans. It's well drained. I'm starting on the best parts of our farm, so these are the gravelly, sandy fields that are well drained and don't do well in a drought year, but are hanging in there really nicely here during this really wet year we've been having. We don't use any pre-emerge on the beans. It's all contact herbicide, so these have been over with Roundup and Enlist 1. And for now, the weeds are under control. I see some late weeds coming up. We may have to spot spray, but we probably won't. Part of our regenerative agriculture practices is to minimize our chemical use, just keep it to absolutely what we need to produce a good crop. And if we get some late season weeds that I don't feel are going to affect the yield, then I just leave them. We can put up with a certain amount of weed pressure because the weeds serve a purpose in the ecosystem. I try not to get too uptight about them as long as they're not damaging our yield potential too much. So those are the two fields on what you might call the northeast side of the farm, the 2 acres and 6 acres respectively. And they are, again, the lightest soil we've got, so they're doing really well in the heavy rain conditions, the heavy moisture conditions we've had. I'm going to take you now to the low ground on the farm, so we're going to get the complete opposite perspective from here. Oh, one other point before I forget with the beans. We did not fertilize our beans this year. We have fertilized our soybeans for the last 4 years, I believe, and we essentially came to the conclusion that with the drought years, we weren't getting a good yield out of the beans anyway. We didn't feel that the cost of the fertilizer was justified. And then with the severe drought we've had the last 3 years, we felt that probably the corn crop, we knew it wasn't utilizing its fertilizer as well, and we felt there was probably enough nutrient out for the beans that we would just forgo soybean fertilizer this year. And it's good cost-saving measure, good ecological practice, and based on how the beans are looking, and again, we'll see some more, I'm happy with it. I think so far, just based on biomass and the bean crop as it looks now, that was probably a wise choice. Okay, so before I get too much further here, I want to point out something that's different from those of you who have been watching this channel for any length of time. We used to have what I refer to as the big 18-acre field out past the silos, to the west of the silos here. And we have since split that into 3 6-acre fields. I'm probably the only farmer around who's taking big fields and making them smaller. But I wanted more crop diversity, and I wanted more fields that were consistently the same size. And a lot of our other fields are 6 or 7 or 8 acres. And then having that 18-acre one thrown in there sometimes made it hard to balance the crop rotation. As I'm walking here, I've got sweet corn on my left. We only got 4 rows of sweet corn in. Normally we plant 12. It's too wet down there. That's the only field that we do any tillage on with any regularity. And that is also the only field, this little strip right here, is the only field we've gotten stuck in this year. Something that's a testament to the no-till and cover crops program and the diverse crop rotation and regenerative practices. Our soil structure is so good. There goes a couple of turkey poults. Our soil structure is so good that we don't get stuck in our no-till fields. Even given all the rain, the only place we've been stuck so far this year was in this little sweet corn strip. here's our soybean field that I was getting to. So this is our wettest ground. I'm gonna walk out a little further into the middle of it. I guess as I'm walking, I'll talk a little bit more about that soil structure thing. So with no-till and cover crops, our soil structure's gotten so good now, and our infiltration rate is also really good. So we were able to capture a lot of that early moisture, and while other more conventional or tilled farm fields were flooding or getting low spots or filling up with water, our soil was taking that water. Eventually it got saturated and it couldn't take any more, and it did actually, we started to get some pooling and ponding, but it was quite a bit later than some of our neighbors, and we're holding that moisture now that it's in the soil. It hasn't been a problem yet. We haven't needed to hold that moisture, but should things get dry from here on out, we'll be happy to have it. And then because the soil structure is good and we could take equipment out even when the ground was saturated, we were able to still do our spraying and get our chemical applications done, such as they are. We're a little bit more limited on our chemical applications than quite a few other farms, but we could get in at the right time. At one point, our local co-op was saying they were behind on spraying by 3,000 acres, and we were happy at that point that even with our small sprayer and older tractors and stuff, that we could get in and get our spraying done when we needed to. It was timely, and we got really good control of our weeds when a lot of other people haven't been able to. And specifically in our soybeans, this is another, like I said, this is our low ground field. This is typically a flooded out spot when we have a wet year. The beans are doing just fine. You can see directly ahead of me, there's a little patch there where there's a little more dirt showing. Behind me, that's probably the worst flooded out spot in this whole field. And normally I would have expected a much bigger area to be killed off, drowned out from the amount of rain that we've had. But that's it. So that's why I say I believe we're looking at a pretty good soybean crop this year, because if this was our worst potential field for drown out wet spots and it looks this good, we're doing all right. Corn's another story. I think we'll go to the cornfield next door here and start talking about corn. So we have had some corn suffer and drown out with the moisture. There's actually a tile line in there. We didn't know there was a tile line in there. It's an old concrete tile line, but it fractured this spring and caved in, and then I came out and fixed it and spliced in a piece of plastic. Still wasn't enough to, it started running and draining better, but it still didn't drain the water fast enough. It's just a little 4-inch tile, so it doesn't have a lot of capacity, but this isn't too bad actually in terms of how much rain we've gotten. You can see the corn is really uneven. I should say this field too, this is the middle 6 out of the 18-acre field that we split. So soybeans are 6 acres on the right here, and oats off in the distance are 6 acres on the left. This cornfield's in the middle, and it is the wettest ground on the farm, is in this 6-acre patch. So this is where we're gonna see the biggest effect. And like in a lot of wet years with corn, we have some variability in the height here. So we've got some short corn here where it's wetter, and then as you get into a little bit higher ground, the corn gets a lot greener, jumps up. It's just inconsistent, you know. You can see looking over this hill here, right where I'm walking now, this is pretty good. But then down in that low spot down there, get my finger pointing in the right spot, right about there, you can see it's yellow. That's a bowl that holds water. There's tile in there, but again, just had a hard time keeping up. If the rain tapers off here for a while and holds off and things get a chance to dry out, that corn should green up and come back around if the nitrogen hasn't been driven too deep into the soil. This corn that I'm walking in is a GMO variety. It's a Brevant variety. We have reduced our fertilizer use somewhat, so this only got about 125 effective units of nitrogen in the form of urea and ammonium sulfate. That's banded right next to the corn. We put all our fertilizer on as granular fertilizer with the corn planter. We don't do any side dress afterwards. We used to, but just to save time and effort, we started doing it all at once, and plus we cut our rates back a little bit so we could do that. It's got about 60 pounds of phosphorus and 60 pounds of potash along with that. So we're keeping our fertilizer rate somewhat low. And then as far as chemicals for weed control, we only use post-emerge. So on this it's Roundup, and it got a shot of 2,4-D when the corn was supposed to be short. We kind of screwed that up and we damaged the corn fairly badly with the 2,4-D, and we've decided we're not going to do that anymore. So we'll be changing our chemical plan for next year. And the reason we only use post-emerge herbicides was because we were always interseeding our corn crop with cover crops. We would plant cover crop between the rows and try to get a variety of stuff going in between the rows. I'm sad to say we're actually going to abandon that because we just haven't been able to make it work, and it's been costing us money with no result. And while I really like the ecological aspect of it, the financial side of it is really kicking my butt. And it's not getting us any return. The last 3 years have been severe drought, so when we would interseed, we'd get no growth. Sometimes some of that seed would come up the next year in the following year's soybean crop, which was, I don't know, it ended up getting sprayed off anyway pretty quickly, so it wasn't doing a whole lot of good there. And now this year it was so wet that we couldn't get in here to interseed. We never bought the seed. And we've been having trouble getting weed control done in certain parts of our cornfields, so we're going to change to probably growing all non-GMO corn, and then we'll use a grass pre-emerge and a broadleaf contact herbicide that's not 2,4-D after the corn is up. And I still have to talk to an agronomist and kind of get some ideas figured out for how we can do that. So this is another bad spot within this 6-acre field where this corn over here is pretty good, and then as you turn, this is not good. This is a very wet spot. This is very saturated. This is actually an area that would be a candidate for some additional drain tile. We've been talking about it, trying to decide if it's worth it. In a dry year, this actually produces really well, but in a wet year, you know, that corn is shin high still. So, and the weeds have just taken over. This is also in the non-GMO corn area, which didn't get any Roundup. It just got a 2,4-D pass. And because it wasn't tank mixed with the Roundup, the 2,4-D didn't affect the non-GMO corn very much. And for a long time, that was looking very healthy compared to our GMO corn. The other thing I like about the non-GMO corn as a concept to keep growing it is that I found a seed distributor, seed breeder actually, close by in Northfield, which is only about 30 minutes away from us. And I just love the idea of getting our corn seed from a local corn breeder. So there's some really appealing things to that. And then as I'm direct marketing my corn for wildlife corn, I've had a lot of customers asking for non-GMO corn. So there's several factors all coming together to make it seem like that's the way for us to go. Now the good thing is, in the grand scheme of things, this is relatively little. This is half an acre that's in bad shape out of, 25 acres of corn. So I'm not worried about it. We're still fine, given how bad the rain and the moisture's been, how excessive, I should say, it's been, because moisture is not inherently bad. You need it, but how excessive it's been. This is not too bad. I'm okay with it. All right, because it's next in line, let's talk about oats. So I didn't grow oats last year. I grew winter rye last year for cover crop seed, and it didn't produce well in the drought. And it was time to establish a new alfalfa field. So I like to plant oats and then direct seed alfalfa after the oats. I know some farmers would put alfalfa in as with the oats as a nurse crop with the alfalfa underseeded. I like to grow the oats for grain, so at a good high seeding rate. Take the grain and then brilliant seed or probably actually no-till drill alfalfa after we take these oats off. The past couple of times I've grown oats, they haven't done very well. Modern oat yields can be in excess of 100 bushels. My best crop of oats to date has been 60 bushels an acre. And the second time I grew oats, I got like 13 bushels an acre because I put it in that really gravelly 2-acre field that we looked at first. And it didn't rain, so it didn't grow. But this time I've got a 6-acre field of oats, and it's looking really good. The oats look really nice. They're starting to dry down a little bit. They got a pretty good case of crown rust. I should have probably put a fungicide on, but along with some other regenerative farmers, I really kind of eschew the fungicide idea because it's like, what are we killing that's beneficial? So again, the oats just have to fend for themselves, and I think they're doing all right. Not experienced enough in growing oats to really, be able to speak authoritatively, but my gut feeling is it's going to be okay, and we're probably going to have a pretty good oat yield. I have 2 varieties out here. This is Minnesota Pearl in front of us, and then I had a problem with the no-till drill when I planted these. I seeded way too heavy at first. That was partly my fault for not paying attention, but partly it was a rented drill and there was a mechanical issue with it as well. So kind of a little of both. So I overseeded at first and then ran out of seed. So I have some Dion oats in the last little bit there. That's like a greener stripe in there. And they're a little bit longer maturing oat, a little taller oat. So they're gonna take just a little longer to get caught up. But it's fine. It all looks good. And I'm looking forward to, by the end of this month, we'll be looking at swathing these down and, getting out the combine and doing some oat harvest. The bad thing about growing oats is that I don't have a market for oats in terms of, like, there's no elevator around here that I can take oats to. But the good thing about growing oats is that I have a grain cleaner and I'm already direct marketing winter rye and corn for wildlife feed, and so winter rye for cover crop seed and as a feed product. So when I harvest these oats, they're going to get run through the grain cleaner, they're going to get bagged up, and they're going to get sold as horse feed or wildlife feed. And if it takes me all year to market this crop, I'm okay with that. But I can make a premium amount of money off of this oat crop by direct marketing it. And then we'll have the straw too. We'll take the straw and bale that, and we'll be able to sell small square bales of straw, which have been in pretty good demand around here. So if all goes well, if, fingers crossed, all goes well, this oat crop will net me more money per acre than corn or beans. So I'm excited about it. I feel like now, third time's the charm. We have a good chance of a good oat crop. One last note about the oats while I'm moving to the next field. These oats have had almost no input cost. Oat seed is really inexpensive to buy. The only input that we put on here is we did one pass with 2,4-D when the oats were about this tall. And we had broadleaf weed coming up. So we did a 2,4-D pass to knock out the broadleaf weed. And then once the oats had a head start, they didn't need anything else. A lot of people fertilize with about 50 pounds of nitrogen for oats, anywhere from 30 to 70. Sometimes that 50-pound range seems to be the sweet spot. All of our Haney soil tests that we've had for the last couple of years are showing that we have anywhere between 40 and 60 pounds of available nitrogen in our soils. And that is as a product of the no-till cover crops plan and the compost extract that I've been putting on everything. All of these acres that I've gone over so far and talked to you about have all gotten fall and spring applications of compost extract for the last 2.5 years. And we are seeing that make a difference, and we're pretty excited about it. So no fertilizer and only one spray pass on these oats, and they're looking great. So what more can you ask for? It's a cheap crop to grow that will, barring any adverse weather effects between now and harvest time, should yield us a really nice return on that acreage. And speaking of alfalfa, here is our one really nice alfalfa field. There's another field that's supposed to be a hay crop field that is giving me trouble. I'll get to that later. But this is ready for second cut. We're getting a little flowering. Dad and I were actually talking about cutting it yesterday, but we had spotty rain in the forecast, and because we're making premium horse hay, we really need to not get this rained on. So this is about 7 acres of alfalfa grass mix. You can see there's some orchard grass in here. There is some tall fescue in here as well. It didn't come through on second cut here as much, but there was quite a bit of it in first cut. And I don't know how, but we did get first cut made really well. We had like 1 4 or 5 day window to make hay, and we hit it. We dropped this field for first cut. It had alfalfa weevil pretty bad, and it was wet. I mean, there was standing water one day, and the next day there wasn't, and then we cut the field. So we just nailed the window for first cut and made 640 some bales off of this, and I have just about sold them all at this point. And now we're ready for second cut. So I think we'll drop this in about 4 more days. We're just waiting for that perfect weather window when we know that we can get it dry and baled and put up. But yeah, long story short, this has been a really good field for us for this is our 3rd year with this field of hay. It's supposed to get terminated this fall, but we may keep it because we're having some issues getting a new field established. So we'll see. I would have really liked to have put a corn crop in here next year, but we're gonna have to think about that a little bit. Still to be decided. All right, so next door to the alfalfa, we got another soybean field. I've talked enough about soybeans. So this is 6 acres, a little over 6 acres, and it looks just as good as the others. And that's really all I need to say about that. Then we've got a 7-acre cornfield. This is probably our best cornfield, although you can see some yellow spots. This has got some wet areas in it too. There's a little yellowing in that low area there, and over on this hillside here, the corn's pretty short. There's one little area there where it got pretty inundated. But generally, this is probably our best field because this was in alfalfa last year. We terminated this alfalfa field in the fall of 23, and then I put compost extract on it and a light cover crop of winter rye. And then this year we no-tilled this corn into the winter rye and put the same fertilizer plan on it as on all our other cornfields, but there's all that available nitrogen from the previous alfalfa crop. So if things stay dry here and this corn can kind of outgrow some of the moisture stunting in those yellow spots, then it's going to yield really well. And in the areas where it's already looking good, like right here, you can see there's a tile line that runs under there. So there, that corn's really dark green right there, and it's twice as tall as some of the other stuff. So we're looking at a really nice yield out of this as well. All right, I do have 2 more cornfields I could show you, but I think it's kind of the same picture no matter where we go. So you get the idea. I am going to show you our one problem child field, and we'll talk a little bit about why it's a problem and why it's been so frustrating and what we're going to do about it and how much time we have left this year to deal with it. Okay, so this is that same cornfield over here that we were just looking at, just from a different angle, that was in alfalfa last year. There's one kind of a bowl wet spot right here in front of us, but nothing's drowned out. I mean, you've noticed I don't have big drowned out spots. And again, I'm attributing that to our soil health practices, the fact that our soil has infiltrated the water pretty well and kind of shunted it away in different directions. Here's a little 2-acre cornfield. My daughter Olivia's out here with me.
Hello.
She found me out here, came all the way out to the field.
Tiny speck in the distance.
So you can see this corn is suffering here. This is a field that around the edge gets really really saturated in a wet year, and it's having a hard time. But this is my problem child here. This field is tough to deal with. And it's a story, and I'm going to spend just a little time talking about it. This is 7.7 acres of mostly weeds at this point. This was in winter rye last year, and after we took the rye crop off, we tilled it up. We installed a little tile that was necessary, and then we normally don't do tillage, but we had to smooth out some erosion spots, and we wanted to brilliant seed it into alfalfa. So in Minnesota, the planting date for alfalfa in the fall is no later than September 1st. So I think it was August 27th that we got this seeded into alfalfa. It was supposed to be an alfalfa grass mix, and it didn't rain. And it hadn't rained all summer. It didn't rain until late September. And then the hay crop got going, and then winter hit, and it ended up winter killing the whole hay crop. Except for a whole bunch of volunteer rye, which we had tried to let that germinate first before we planted the alfalfa, but with no rain, the rye never came up. So then the next spring, all that was left out here was the rye. So then we hemmed and hawed and tried to decide what to do, and we couldn't have any control over what had happened the previous fall. But the next thing that we did was our mistake, which was we terminated the rye with the intention of replanting this to alfalfa, again, with a brilliant seeder. We came in and did tillage, again, a light pass with a field cultivator, but we did it only a couple of days after spraying the rye. We were under a weather window. We wanted to get planted before it rained, and we only had like 4 or 5 days to get everything done. So we sprayed. A couple days later, we field cultivated. We gave it a day and a half or so to dry out, and then we brilliant seeded, and then it rained. And we were like, okay, we got it done. But the bad thing was the rye had an allelopathic effect, and it killed all the alfalfa for a second time. So after some weeks of watching this not do anything, we were scratching our heads and wondering what had happened. We finally figured out what we'd done. And then I came in and actually no-tilled in alfalfa in, I guess it would have been late May or maybe early June. I can't quite remember. And I'm going to see if I can find an example, because you can see it's like underseeding at this point. There is alfalfa coming up in rows where I no-tilled it in. Get the phone down low. Like here's an alfalfa row right down here. and you can't see it because the weeds and the grass kind of obscure it. So I came in then and no-till drilled this with about 10 pounds, 10.5 pounds per acre of alfalfa, because there was some alfalfa that survived. And then it started raining even more. And the alfalfa germinated all over the field, but then it drowned out in the low spots. We got so much rain in such a short amount of time that probably a third of the field, 25% to 30% of this field, has now drowned out. And it's been too wet to come in here and cut it to get rid of these weeds. We were gonna just cut this and bale it off, and I don't know what we're gonna do with it when we bale it, honestly. Take it to the sale barn or try to direct market it at a really cheap cost. So now we've got half the field where alfalfa is coming up. You just can't see it because of the weeds, and the lower part where it's gonna have to be reseeded again. It's been really frustrating. This field is in limbo, and we're hoping that within the next week or so it's going to get dry enough, since we're looking at a drier weather period, that we can get in here with the haybine, we'll cut it down, we'll bale it, we'll get a better idea of what we're dealing with, and then we'll have to decide what to do from here. Dad and I have agreed we're going to give it the rest of the summer to try to do something with it, and if we can't get it turned around, we'll end up spraying it down in this fall, and we'll put corn in here next year or something else. So that's really the whole story. I've shown you the best parts of the farm and the worst parts. And the worst parts really aren't too bad. I feel like we're sitting very, very good right now as far as crop production goes. So that's going to conclude my little mini crop tour. Compared to a lot of our neighbors and other farmers around the state, we have, I think, a really nice crop going. And I got to be careful how I say that, because I don't want that to sound like braggadocio. It's just luck. It's a lot of luck, and the fact that some of the practices we've been using are going to help us contend with those adverse weather conditions. But of course, our heart goes out to all the farmers out there who are struggling with flooding and crop damage and inability to get things planted. And at the end of the day, we're all in this together, and when one of us isn't doing well, then, you know, it affects all of us. So agriculture is always a community, you know, and the last thing I want to do is present an image that somehow I'm doing better than everyone else because of some skill that I've got or some knowledge that I had. That's not the case. I'm not better at this than anybody. So take it for what it's worth, I guess. We're feeling very fortunate to be in the position that we're in. And that's really all there is to it. I wanted to end on one last note, because I talked about direct marketing, how I'm going to direct market oats, and how I've been direct marketing corn, and give you just a quick look here inside the granary, which has become kind of my direct marketing hub, and then that's going to conclude the video here. So the old granary here has been where I've been processing corn for a number of years, and we've got part of it cleaned out and a little bit better organized than we used to. We've got the fanning mill here, our roller mill in the background, because we started doing cracked corn. And then I've got several products here for sale. So I've got bags of cracked corn ready to go. There's 40 bags there. And then where Olivia's sitting back there, that's my shelled corn. And I've got a wagon full of shelled corn with a roof on it, so we can pull up to the shed and run shelled corn through the fanning mill whenever we need to. Ordinarily, I would just sell wildlife corn in the wintertime and be done typically in, say, maybe late April, maybe early May. But commodity corn prices have been pretty low, and our yield last year wasn't very good with the drought. And so I said, let's just keep selling wildlife corn into the summer months. And it's turned out to be a good move. Sales have been pretty good. And I think, well, we've already sold what we're going to the elevator. So we're out of corn now on the farm, except for what I have in the gravity box that I can bag from and do wildlife corn. So when that runs out, then I'm sold out for the year. And when that runs out, we will have marketed more than half of last year's corn crop in bags direct to consumers. So I'm feeling really good about that. Farming on a small scale like we are, we're always looking for ways to minimize our inputs and maximize our profitability. And I feel like just this past year, we've managed to get a handle on that really well. And that's partly by expanding the direct marketing, whether it's with corn, winter rye. There's bags of winter rye back here that I'm saving for cover crop seed. But I marketed all our excess rye, and then when we do oats later, we'll market those. All of our alfalfa small square bales are direct marketed. And then this year with inputs, we didn't fertilize the soybeans. We planted half of our corn as non-GMO corn. So rather than paying $360 a bag for seed corn, we were paying $85 a bag for seed corn for half of our crop. Getting more perennial crops in. Oats are a cheap crop to grow as an annual. You know, hay is expensive to plant, but you get to make a crop off of it for 3 years in our case. So just trying to put all those systems together. And then with the compost that I kind of hinted on, but we'll talk about that in some other video, trying to build some more of our own on-farm fertility. So we're trying to bring all these pieces of the puzzle together. And you haven't seen me much on YouTube because I've been working really hard at it. And I feel like we're finally starting to get somewhere with it, and we're starting to see the benefits of it. And I'm very, very hopeful for the rest of the year here. So thanks for watching. Thanks for joining me. And for those of you who have made it all the way to the end of this video, we'll see you next time.